Hello and welcome to our Team Alpha podcast, episodes 3 and 4. My name is James MJ Watling, former professional athlete and fighter, founder and head coach of Team Alpha, based in Alnwick, Morpeth and Jesmond. This podcast is a focus on all things that improve the human spirit with a special emphasis on sports and the martial arts. Tonight's episodes are in fact a focus on business and the entrepreneurial spirit. We have with us two guests who embody this from the Northeast that have created and grown substantially their individual brands and businesses. Our first guest began her career at 15 years of age, starting her own website during the dot-com boom in the early 2000s. She then moved into work with chartered surveyors, allowing her to expand her knowledge base and focusing on management and leadership. Now owner of the Northeast's most successful clothing company, Aim Leisure, which also features a sampling and design element for growing clothing businesses, expanding their brands. Ladies and gentlemen, tonight's first guest is Miss Amy Fettis. Amy, how are you doing?
Hello.
Thank you for joining us tonight.
Thanks for inviting me. It's nice to be here.
It's great to have you in. How's your day been?
Challenging today.
Right.
It's been a busy week. We're in a period of growth, so any time of growth always comes with a little bit of pain as well. I think.
Absolutely. So the growth being, obviously we've just kind of come out of this post-lockdown pretty much now after the whole quote-unquote COVID situation. So how would that affect your business and more specifically from what you've just mentioned, are you seeing an upshot now of business as we're getting into this period?
Yeah, I think coming out of the lockdown, we definitely benefited because it shone a light on overseas supply chains and how fragile they can be, you know, when something like this occurs, which interrupts trading on a normal kind of global level. And so we received a lot of interest and inquiries about because we're British made. So as you mentioned, obviously I created a brand, Aim Leisure, which is an entirely British brand. And so the first few years of this journey, I did a lot of talking about the fact that we completely designed it, developed it, all the raw materials, all the production was done in the UK. So I think people had started to find me via that. But then obviously we now provide the sampling and development service and small batch production for other brands. And again, that's an entirely British, UK-based service. So that's been getting a lot of attention as well. Right. So yeah, it's been I have to say that, you know, the lockdown period has probably helped us. I've been very lucky. I've been very fortunate that we've been one of the few that's actually thrived coming out the other side.
We were talking about AIM, and obviously I have questions for you tonight, just things to ask you that are centered around that, but we've kind of led off with that. So could you you say that it's a British brand, so what exactly do you mean by that?
That every element is centered around the UK. So we started the development and the design of the collection here in Jesmond, in Newcastle. And then that led us to raw material suppliers that are all throughout the UK. Our fabric comes from a mill in Nottingham where they actually weave it, you know, they create the fabric, dye it in the UK. And all the elements that make the products are sourced in this country, or you know, from the United Kingdom. And we do the production, and we always have done the production here as well. So it is entirely British, that brand and that collection.
It's interesting because there's not many companies, and I appreciate that, you know, different companies, obviously there's a variety of different companies out there, clothing companies, coffee companies, food companies, you know, leisure, sports companies, whatever it is that they're providing, electronics, etc. And it's not always practical necessarily to source all the materials from your own country. I know in the States, I know the current president is pushing for, you know, for goods and services to be very much American founded, American made, sourced in America. And to be honest with you, I don't know other companies in here, over here in the UK that are basically following this same type of ethos that you are. And I guess the idea has been that, China being a stereotypical place to source materials and labor because it's cheaper and all the rest of it, and will you pay more for for goods that are founded in your own country, in this case the UK. But so how has that affected you? So it's not obviously been about doing them the cheapest, perhaps doing them keeping that ethos. So my question is, has that always been your driving force from day one to have everything British sourced? And what has been the benefit of that? And I guess some of the negatives of staying with that vision.
It was something that I always felt quite passionate about doing, and I have been able to achieve it. And, in terms of money, I think that's an interesting point, because the way that my collection developed meant that it was very sustainable. So we were only buying what we needed. We were making to order. Rather than overstocking. I think that there has definitely been a trend towards buying in bulk to get the best unit price. But from a financial point of view for a business, that isn't always the best course of action, because if you tie up all of your capital in stock, you've then got to sell that through before you actually realise your return and your profit. So to answer your question in a roundabout way, one of the benefits, I think, has been cash flow for survival. So this is the end of financial year 4, so my business is going into year 5.
Wow, yeah.
Most startups don't survive beyond 18 months. So to be going into year 5 is something I'm really proud of. And there's been a huge amount of hurdles along the way and challenges. So benefits, making in the UK means that I think your money is more manageable, because you can buy in smaller quantity and your money goes further. It's meant that I haven't had to tie up lots of capital into stock, which I've needed to then find creative ways of selling. I've literally just made what I've needed to fulfill the sales and grown that way.
Yeah.
And I think that it can be a bit of a false economy if you're going for the cheapest unit price, but it means you've got to buy huge amounts. And what happens if that huge amount of stock that you've ordered, which probably will take you 3 months to actually arrive, what if it's wrong? And then you've tied up all your capital, you've got nothing to sell. Where do you go from there? Yeah,
it's an interesting point, because I think the world's biggest company, or one of the world's biggest companies, Apple, for them that's an issue. I remember reading the Steve Jobs biography, and as Tim Cook was taking over, took over as CEO, but one of the heads of one of the departments, and he'd managed to get the materials down to a point, the stored materials down to a point where it went from something like having to have a 90-day turnover on a sale to 60 days to 30 days to just 1 day. So that reduced the amount of materials that they had to keep in stock, and they could basically just make to order, and therefore that saved cash flow. Not that they're short of cash flow, but my point is, even on a big business, that's a very important model.
Absolutely. And I think it's very different when you've got a big audience. So if you're an established business and or you're an influencer with a big following, and therefore that you've got a lot of sales that will. So whenever you launch a new product or an existing product, whenever you're marketing that, that you're going to receive a lot of sales very quickly. Yeah. Then of course holding stock is an advantage, because you can service those sales quickly. But for new businesses and early stage businesses where that demand hasn't been established yet, you really do need to have supply and demand. You have to make the sales first, and then start to get a feel for what your audience want, what colours. So just I'm just sticking to what I know, which is the fashion at the moment. What colours, what sizes? Is that menswear? Is that women's wear? Until you have that data, which you need time to build up, it's impossible to correctly forecast stock. So therefore making to order, which is what I did with AIM and what we now offer to our clients on a private label basis, it's really attractive, and so that side of the business is growing, and I think we're also just very again very fortunate in my kind of sector that there is a big focus at the moment on transparency and sustainability. People are interested to know where their clothing is being made, whether the workers are being paid fairly for it. There's been a lot of bad press recently for fast fashion retailers who are making clothes at very, very
Are we
low
allowed to
prices.
say their names? I mean, it's my podcast. We do what the hell we want.
I'm avoiding, but
No
you know,
worries.
but that's definitely, you know, getting it. That's definitely getting to the consumer. The consumer is now a bit more discerning. They are asking more questions.
Our first sponsor is Luxfolio. Luxfolio Real Estate looks at real estate from a more creative perspective, offering a modernized service and approach to all of your real estate needs. Their services include buying, selling, renting, and leasing. They provide a world-class service that knows no limits and can service your property anywhere in Dubai. At Luxfolio Real Estate, you don't simply represent another buyer in the market, you are a priority and a part of a highly successful team. They can be found on Luxfolio at Facebook page and info at luxfoliorealestate.ae. That is info at luxfoliorealestate.ae. So I'd like to talk a little bit about yourself and how you got started. So as I mentioned in the introduction that you'd started with a website business, an online business during the .com boom, which was, you know, famously, you know, companies were just were being created and rising up left, right, and center. You know, a lot of companies were being sold to bigger companies who were buying them out, and then they were starting to realize, hang on, you need to actually have some kind of turnover here, some profitability. So could you tell us a little bit about the early days in the website? You moved to the chartered surveyors and just that kind of turnover then, and you were 15 as well, so obviously you were very young.
I just always had a real need to like do things and create things, and I think anyone who's listening to this who's an entrepreneur will be able to relate. There's not often a logic to it. It's just something that you have in you that you just feel like you need to do. And so, yeah, I created a website when I was 15. I, you know, started to monetize it. And I think part of the motivation as well was that I didn't feel like the academic route was the one that I really wanted to take. And so I had a strong motivation to try and prove ultimately to my parents that I could make a living, you know, outside of school. That definitely rocked the boat. I think as well, I was quite fortunate that my academic grades were good, but a blessing and a curse. I got good grades across the board at GCSE, but that also wasn't helpful because it didn't really push me down a particular route. It didn't really say, oh, you're very strong in the arts or you're very strong in the maths and that, you know. So it kind of just left me in a bit of no man's land that, it was actually what do I feel like I really wanted to do, and I wanted to create something. So I did leave school and, you know, worked part-time on the website business and always had part-time jobs as well, which led me into this job with a local firm of chartered surveyors at their head office. And I just went in part-time, worked in the letting department, and then gradually kind of just, you know, as roles became available, moved throughout the company and really enjoyed it, just learned huge amounts and spent 2 years with them. And went kind of as far as I felt that my career could, and then moved down to Jesmond, age 19, and started working for a mortgage company actually first. And then when I was working for the mortgage company, they were linked to businesses, a property investment firm and a mortgage company. And the guy who's running the property investment firm said, basically, if she comes to work for me, we're going to sell more property, you'll get more mortgages. So, you know, let her move over, and moved over. And again, you know, I think, again, maybe I've just been in the right place at the right time. So that was as property was just really, really like reaching the boom, you know, so buy-to-let property. And
2006, 7.
Yeah. And you know, people were just going crazy for buy-to-let. And did that, and it was really kind to me, and worked for this particular company, then went out on my own, and I did that right up until 2010, when the effects of the financial crash really started to, and it took a couple of years, I think, to really filter down, you know, and to be felt. And 2010, I felt like there wasn't much further that I could go with property. I felt like I needed to come out of that world. It started to get quite messy, and it wasn't a nice place to be around that crash. So yeah, I had a bit of time away, 6 months sabbatical, because I'd worked really hard up until that point. I was coming up mid-20s, and I'd really grafted, and so had a bit of time away, kind of recovered because it was really tough. I learned a lot of lessons in going through the closing of a business, making that decision not to continue and closing, taught me a huge amount, and then I decided to actually requalify. So having all those years before, when I decided that I didn't want to continue down the academic route, I started on a higher level apprenticeship in leadership and management, and then worked for some amazing businesses and did some amazing projects. The last one being for a company that put all of the tableware in front of you in the Michelin star restaurants. So cool. Supply all the chefs with the plates that you eat your dinner off,
right.
And the shard, and it was fascinating. And then that brought me up to 2014, which was when I felt confident and ready again to start a business, and hence ended up here in the clothing sector.
So, I mean, that's one of the questions I want to ask you is if you could tell the listeners a little bit about your journey to become an entrepreneur, which we've covered. So at that point, 2012, did you say? Round about then you'd made a decision to start your own business.
2014.
14, sorry, 14. So 6 years ago, roughly. Mm-hmm. So did it just come to you that you wanted to do a clothing company, or was it something that, were you just reading a magazine, you turned a page, or perhaps you were, here's a good story, you just, I don't know, you bought some sportswear from somewhere, you didn't like the feel of it, you thought you could do better, and that inspired you to want to do it?
I think I've just always had a good eye for opportunities and seeing where there's perhaps growth areas and niche. And the London Olympics 2012.
Yes.
I think that inspired people to really get into exercise in a big way.
Mm-hmm.
And that coincided with the rise of the selfie generation as social media was coming to the fore.
And also that may perhaps tied in with the availability of the smartphone. The smartphone prices have dropped.
2012, 2013, 2014. Yeah. So, people were very conscious about what they were wearing for exercise as much as they were conscious about what they were wearing every day. I think those were the times when it was changing from just, Fruit of the Loom t-shirt and jogger bottoms.
Adidas trackies.
Yeah, exactly. And
the classics.
Yeah.
Black and white.
And so I just felt like there had been this shift towards athleisure, the wearing of kind of casual and sportswear in normal environments, but that the high street perhaps had been quite slow to really cotton on to that. And there were some big players in the market at that time, like Lululemon. Nike were doing pretty good things as well. But, at the every man pocket price, it wasn't there. And you'd walk through a high street retailer and, see rows and rows of beautiful trend-led fashion clothing. And then you'd get to the activewear and it would look like a 90s Mr. Motivator neon
him?
hangover.
Maybe he's listening.
Do you know what I mean?
Yeah, definitely.
And you just think, well, why have they got teams of designers designing all these beautiful trend-led clothes, but the sportswear is just getting a bit of a raw deal here. Yeah. And so I thought with the contacts that I'd made over the years and my knowledge of, starting a business, that I could perhaps source some of this product that was already out there, being made in factories, probably overseas at that time, and brand it and sell it to people like me who were looking for that kind of more fashion-forward sportswear. And my sister and I have always been really into exercise. I like to swim. Kate's very much into the gym, and so it was something that we were experiencing in real life, that we wanted to find this clothing and didn't feel like it was out there at that time. And so I started that and did that for 18 months. So I set up a free fitness event in Jesmond Dean where I'd invite people to come every week and I'd pay a personal trainer to lead a boot camp. And it was like having a focus group. Sorry, every month. I said every week, but we do the last week of every month. And And I'd just get the opportunity to see what people were wearing, to present some product to them, to get their feedback, see what they thought of it.
Yeah.
And that gave me, lots of really good information. I was trading as well at the time, using like eBay and such like, to just not big money at all, but just, it was a really good research and development period. And then I won an award at the Northern Star Awards, awarded by Sage for Innovative Business of the Year, which I think was a big thumbs up that I was doing something that people were interested in.
Yeah.
And that attracted a bit of attention. And basically I was invited to join a company, or the formation of a company, to create a brand. And so I went from buying and selling product and spending that 18 months researching what people were needing to having the opportunity to actually create a brand completely from scratch.
That's incredible. I mean, it's interesting. You mentioned to me once about the boot camps, but it's almost like live feedback, isn't it? So you're getting real-time feedback on what people want and what they don't want.
There's no point creating a product that a customer doesn't want to buy. And that is the biggest mistake that I think a lot of entrepreneurs make, that they create something that they think there's a need for, or something that they particularly want to create, without doing the market research to make sure that there's a demand.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, clothing companies in a sense are a dime a dozen on Instagram. Everybody's got their own clothing.
Bedroom business,
Yeah, their own clothing brand, and there's so many of them out there. It's, it's hard to separate the wheat from the chaff, so to speak. And the demand's not likely to increase, but the products or the companies are. So the more products you get, the customer base doesn't increase, and therefore they've got more choice. So you're not likely to hit on, unless you've got a big following. You can build a big following and then perhaps dip into that. And research, of course, R&D.
You do. Yes, there are lots of businesses, but every sector. Think of the beauty sector. Over the years, that has just gone crazy. Every celebrity, female celebrity you can think of, has their own beauty line now. But you can still win if it's what the consumer wants, because you can make a beautiful, clothing line, beauty line, whatever it is. But it might look beautiful, but actually if nobody cares, then of course you're not going to make a sale. But if you make a beauty line that people are crying out for, that there's a gap in the market, then you're going to make sales. 100%.
I think it was Walmart who coined the phrase, "A customer's always right." And what's meant by that is not the customer's right as in, "Oh, this coffee's bad, I want my money back," but whatever the customer buys, that's what you provide, because that's what they want.
And that brings me right back to why I have this sampling, development, small batch production service now, because this is a sustainable way for businesses to develop product, put it out there, see what people are interested in, get rid of anything that they're not, and focus on the stuff that sells, and then build that up before you invest into the stock.
Definitely. I mean, I should say as well, with the Team Alpha, with our brand, AIM is our official clothing provider, or designer rather, and over the years, you have designed several products for us, and it's been a case of just testing and seeing what works. And when I was competing as a professional, kickboxer, fighter, whatever, you provided some of the corner wear for that, the Pretty Boy Assassin wear, and that was kind of done on a spin, really, wasn't it? It was
in
just
a few hours on a Saturday, like literally the day of the fight,
which went down really well. I'd just like to talk about one of our other main sponsors, AIM Leisure. AIM Leisure was established in 2016 as a fashion sportswear brand and has developed to be a well-respected wholesale supplier of trend-led quality uniform and promotional clothing, both to boutique gyms and sports clubs, using UK manufacturing facilities and an entirely British supply chain for raw materials. You can contact them on www.aimattheleisure.com. That is www.aimattheleisure.com. AIMATHLEISURE.com. And you can also find them on Instagram at AIM Leisure, and that is AIM, AIM Leisure. So what would you say was the main obstacle in creating this brand, in creating AIM and growing it to where it is now, but then also perhaps an individual or a circumstance that helped you to get to this point now. So essentially, what was the main obstacle that you found, the main headache, but then also what was the main what helped you to succeed? Was it an individual, or was it just an act of fate, so to speak, that got you to where you are now?
Yeah, it's actually been quite an interesting journey. So as I just touched upon before, I didn't enter into this on my own. So originally I actually was part of a team. So there was a consortium of 3 investors and myself and another guy who were there to kind of create the business. And I don't want to go into details, but that didn't work out.
Yeah.
And it left me in a situation where I had a team and overheads, and I was on my own, basically. And that was hugely difficult. I had to take on some borrowing. I had to rely on the goodwill of the team to help me and support me through. It was really, really challenging. And so that was my first big hurdle, where I was just kind of dropped from a great height to, try and take it on myself, which I decided to do. That was before we actually incorporated AIM, so we had a different working name for the brand at that stage. So that was 2015, end of 2015, beginning of 2016. So kind of 18 months on after the R&D period from when I first started out on the journey. Incorporated AIM in 2016. Then had another massive blow because Brexit happened, and we'd had some funding from one of the European development funds, which was to match fund my investment and the money that I'd borrowed into the business. That fell through because of Brexit, so we lost 6 figures, which I needed to kind of continue the business going as it was in terms of the development. Lost that, had to pivot so fast. So we were deep in development at that stage. We didn't actually have anything to sell or monetize. And so I had to very quickly change the brief from being a full 32-piece collection down to a very small core collection that we could sell.
So just to interject there, so essentially all this funding, this money, it's gone into developing the brand, preparing to make the brand to be able to sell. So at this point, you don't have anything to sell.
No, we're still developing at this stage. So had to really quickly, make the decision that what can we monetize fast. And so one thing that I discovered was that there was demand not just from a consumer for this product, there was actually demand from a trade marketplace as well. So as we've discussed, Team Alpha, we have created products for you in the past. And there was a need out there from clubs, boutique gyms, spas, yoga studios who wanted to have their own clothing collection, but didn't necessarily want to go through the pain of developing it, which I had been experiencing. And so I created this core collection, which was a much smaller number of garments than we'd set out to create. But it was the ones that the people were telling me that they needed. So like leggings, tights, vests, crop top, tank. So we effectively had blank shapes that we'd created for AIM that were fashion forward, that were what I had set out to do, that were aesthetically pleasing, and not just bog standard kind of wholesale garments. And then what we were able to do was apply the branding of the business to those garments, so we could create a uniform, or we could create a little clothing collection that could be sold as merchandise or gifted. And so that really helped me to commercialize the business fast so that I could save it, because that 2016 I nearly lost it, through kind of the decision of the consortium not to continue, then the knock from the Brexit loss. So I came very, very close to losing the business that year, but just through sheer determination managed to turn it around. And then I had a second massive blow when an angel investor effectively stepped in, and again, without going into details, it was absolutely heartbreaking situation, and they left me in a very difficult position again. And so I had to just really put the blinkers on, consolidate what we were doing, and work incredibly hard with no money, just managing cash flow as best that I could all throughout 2018 into 2019, and just this year now, coming to the end of financial year 4, are things starting to kind of settle a little bit. But I'm very proud of the achievement. We're still going. We're into the 5th financial year in September. That in itself is an achievement, but I have doubled the sales every year. So, the business is growing despite all those knocks. But had I not gone through the experience of closing the property business in 2010, there's no way I could have got through this. So you said, funnily enough, was it an act of fate? And in 2010, I was just devastated when I had to make the decision to close that business, and I really thought I'd failed. Like, I thought that was, failure, and it knocked my confidence, anxiety. I was quite depressed. I really, really took it hard. However, I now see with hindsight what a lesson and what a blessing that was, because had I not gone through that experience and realized how difficult it is to give up, I maybe would have given up, but I've not, because I know how hard it is to give up now. Through this, those 3 times when I've had those really bad experiences, that has driven me on to keep going. And thank goodness I have, because here I am now today.
Because you pretty much answered it there, because I was going to say that, as you were saying there, we had to do this, we had to do that. Well, in reality, you are the driving force behind it. And I think you answered the question there. It was, what got you through at the hardest, at the toughest times. And as you've just said, it was the lessons you've learned in the past that gave you that kind of grit and determination to continue. So, but there was never a point where you were going to say, that's enough. It's just taking that next step and just getting through the next day.
Many times I have on this, in these last, 6 years since 2014, but really in the last kind of 3, 2016 was a challenge, but obviously I was still quite fresh into it. So, but oh my goodness, the last 3 years, there's been so many occasions when I've just come, within minutes and one decision and of just throwing the towel in, but always managed to find something to kind of pull myself through, which I think relates a lot to sports. It's that mentality, isn't it? And fighting, especially, you get knocked down 9 times, but you get back up 10. And I often equate running a business to being an athlete, that you have to eat well, you have to sleep well, you have to hydrate yourself, you have to do the work on yourself, you have to do the reading, you have to get your mind in the right place. It's the same, because ultimately it's a test of endurance.
100%. I think it was, Jack Dempsey, I'm paraphrasing. So Jack Dempsey was world champion, my favorite fighter of all time, back in 1916. I think he won the world title against Jess Willard. And he said it's something like, I'm paraphrasing, something like a true champion is essentially rated by how many times he gets back up. It's something like that. We could maybe when we get to the Jamie territory, I can say, Callum, can you just search that for me? But it's a quote from Jack Dempsey. It's something like a true champion is determined by how many times he gets back up. But we'll get that direct quote when we throw this podcast up. But funny enough, when I was going to pick up Callum, I was listening to Dana White in conversation with Anthony Robbins, and he was talking about how, when you wake up, life is there to kind of kick you in the head, and you just got to get up, and you kind of appreciate that, realize that, and irrespective of that, you get out of bed, you go up, and you just keep moving forward. And it could be that your personal life wants to kick you in the head, or business can then kick you in the head, and you just got to accept that and keep moving forward, because that's part of
I honestly don't think there's
progression.
Any secret to success in whatever, other than just don't give up, just keep going. It's like, even on the worst days, if you make a little bit of progress, then that in itself, is it's not the big moves. And people always say, oh, it's an overnight success. It's never an overnight success. Never.
20 years to overnight success. 10 years to overnight success.
So even to where I am now, I don't deem this to be a success in any stretch. There's so much more that I want to do. Survival is a win. I think to just be here, going into the 5th year, that's a win for me.
Absolutely.
But, even that has been, as we've discussed, 20 years. I'm 34, I'm 35 next year. So from starting out as 15, I've been grafting for 20 years. So when people say to me, like, oh, I've got this idea, and it's going to make me a millionaire overnight. Sorry, but you should have started 10 years ago, to get to that point. And I don't know about you, James, but every book I've read, every podcast I've listened to, even if people don't see it, there has been a lot of work to get that person to where they are. So, the moral of the story is you should start like yesterday. If you've got something you want to do, you got to just get on and just don't give up. Just
absolutely. There's an interesting proverb. It's the best time to plant a tree is 10 years ago or today.
Yeah, totally. And I think, it's not about flogging a dead horse either.
Yes.
Because,
I've had please bring this point. This is an important point.
I've had to pivot, as I've mentioned lots of time. It's about knowing when you need to change tack and just close the door you've been pushing against, or stop trying to open and look for where the opportunities are.
Yeah.
But ultimately, it's still forward motion, isn't it? It's still continuing in the direction of travel.
So it certainly is. I mean, I completely agree. What I was going to ask you there, just before it leaves my mind, is so what advice would you give to somebody who, a young person or an older person or somebody who's looking to create their own business, or perhaps has created their own business? They've started to make some movement with the business, but it doesn't seem to be working for them. So what point should they say, this isn't working, I need to stop and find something else? Or at what point do they need to say, this is working, but I need to change this, and this? Or as I said before, should I give up completely? So how do you differentiate between the two?
So I think there's a couple of things that I would say. First thing is to identify quickly whether what you're working on is needed. So is it an issue that there aren't sales coming in, like you're not monetizing it? Mm-hmm. So if that is the biggest challenge, then you need to look at whether what you're doing is right and ask your audience. Mm-hmm. So work out who your ideal customer is and go and talk to them and say, is this something that you actually want?
Talk to your customer. How about that, 2020?
And is it at the right price? Get direct feedback. And if your feedback comes back and they say yes, then you just haven't reached enough people to be able to monetize that, to move it forward. If it's that actually they don't want it, then pivot, and you need to pivot and look at what you can monetize from what you have quickly. So real life example, developing the AIM collection, and I had this grand vision of a direct to consumer 32-piece brand, 32-piece collection, all beautifully branded and trend led. Actually, the quicker win was taking those shapes and selling them into the trade, where I could go and spend an hour with a gym owner and get an order for multiple units rather than trying to build a website and sell one. So, look at what you have and how can you pivot and monetize and commercialize that quickly to be able to get yourself out of a hole if that's where you've got to, if you're just stuck and you're not sure where the next sale is coming from, or you're not bringing enough money in to survive. And then secondly, I would say that there is a perception through Instagram that the life of an entrepreneur is glamorous and, you can work like a handful of hours a week and be driving a beautiful car. That's absolute rubbish.
Well, yes, of course you can. I mean, come on.
The life of an entrepreneur is not glamorous at all. Like, it is 6 days a week, actually working, one day off if you're lucky, to recover. And it's non-stop. And I think it's not for everyone, and that's okay. Like, if you do want to have like a work-life balance, and you do want to have nice holidays and have disposable income, then really question whether being an entrepreneur is for you, because there is also being an intrapreneur, where you work within somebody's business and you can still have that kind of freedom within somebody else's business, but you get your paycheck at the end of the month. And if clocking off and going home and not thinking about work is more comfortable for you, and you just like to know how much is coming in every month so you can budget accordingly, there is absolutely nothing wrong with that. And there are business owners like me, like you, who welcome entrepreneurs into the business who need that, creativity and that dynamic. But if you want to, if you want the business to be yours, then you just have to accept that it's going to be painful. And it is, and it probably is going to be for at least the first 5 years, if not the first decade, before you might start to feel like you can perhaps take the foot off the gas a little bit. And there's nothing wrong with either, but I think you just have to get real with yourself about what is most important to you. And if being an entrepreneur is something that you just feel really passionate that you need to do, that's how I feel. I feel like I haven't got a choice. then you just have to kind of suck it up and take responsibility and say, right, it's not going to be much fun, but I'm going to make the sacrifices. And again, does that not come back to professional athletes? And you have to accept that you're not going to be out every Friday night and every Saturday night with your friends.
Absolutely. I mean, just for anybody who's listened to this podcast right now, run it back 3 minutes and listen to that again, because that is absolute knowledge bombs right there. I'm completely serious. Run it back 4 minutes now, and listen to that, and listen to it 3 or 4 or maybe 5 times or even 10 times until it enters your mind and stays in your consciousness, because it's very true. I mean, to give you a perfect example of what you've just said, well, 2 things actually. First, before I forget this one, it's like what you said about there's nothing wrong with that, and there isn't anything wrong with that. And the Instagram generation, I'm making quotation marks with my fingers, want to believe that it's about holidays and having fast cars and having your own business, and you have to do it this way, and they see the entrepreneurs, but they don't see behind the scenes of what's been going on. But perhaps there's also this idea that if I don't do that, I've failed in some way. But as you said, there's nothing wrong with getting a normal job. And if that's what you want to do, that's absolutely fine. That's not a problem. There's a YouTuber, I can't remember exactly. It's something like Let's Beast or Beast something. It's not Beast Mode, it's Let's Beast. And he's a switched on guy, actually. And he's released an app recently, and it takes in your your micronutrients and all this type of thing. And that's how he got successful. Really interesting. But what he said was he's recording himself talking, obviously, on his phone, and he's just sitting he's got a Chick-fil-A sitting there talking. And what he's saying, and he's talking about what you're saying, not in the way that you've said it, but similar, but on that kind of scheme. And he's saying about, as an entrepreneur, there's this idea that you see on Instagram and they're out and they're having parties and things like that. He says, well, sometimes that's what's called coconut rich. I don't know if you've ever heard of that, coconut rich, where you're over in Thailand because it's cheap and it looks good on your Instagram. But what he did, what's interesting is he sat there and he's worked out the amount of hours he works in the week and what he gets paid. And he's doing really well as an entrepreneur, but when you work out the amount of hours, it's less than minimum wage.
Oh my goodness, I don't even want to know that.
I don't want to know. I don't want to know.
It would be awful to
do you know what I mean?
Out.
So what he's saying is, it's like 90-hour weeks, and it's like, it looks on paper that you can be doing reasonably well, but the amount of time and energy, and it's like, and for me, it's there is a link there to fighting, because when I've fought for nearly 30 years, and 20 of those as a professional. And, I dedicated my entire life to that pursuit. Obviously, I had those supplement business, the clothing business, the fight business, and doing my coaching and teaching, all that kind of stuff. But I was a dedicated professional fighter. So I dedicated all my life. So I wasn't going out. I wasn't drinking. I was eating right. I was training all the time. And that was just my passion and focus, because I was able to do that, But my mindset allowed me to do that. And it also allowed me to create businesses and create Team Alpha, because I'm just driven that way. It's like I don't, there's times where I do get tired on occasion. I need to sleep for a day and then I'm ready to go. So it's like, and your mind's always to think, what's the next thing? What's the next thing? And I don't know how you feel, but if I take an extended break, it kind of kills me, because I need to be doing something, So
it's definitely,
but not everybody's wired that way.
No, I was just going to say, it's that, you either can relate to that, where it's not, you can't explain it, friends and family won't understand what drives you to do it. And again, let's look at them against each other, being an athlete versus being, an entrepreneur. And I think there are similarities that sometimes it makes absolutely no logical sense, but it's just something that you have to do and want to do, that you've almost got that gift, and you just, it's a blessing and a curse. But I think one thing as well that I just probably would like to highlight is that, we mentioned there about, how do you know whether it's the right time to give up or not? And I think that there's also a really important point that sometimes what you might perceive as other people being successful versus you not, it's very difficult to see somebody else's balance sheet. So, you might see someone driving around in a beautiful car that's been working on their business for as long as you, but as we've touched upon, you don't know how many years that's been in the creating before they've got to that point. You also don't know what level of debt there is, and everyone has a different appetite for risk. So, some people might be much more highly geared with finance and therefore have more of the kind of, and again, I'm going to use the quotation marks, which you can't see on the, but the trappings of success. And so I think, comparison is the thief of joy. And so all you have to do is just kind of stay in your lane, focus on what you're doing, know what your goals and what your achievements are and what's going to define success for you, and just stay on it and pivot as many times as you need to until you reach that, but kind of disregard what you see other people doing, because you never know 100% unless you're in that person's shoes, what's going on. So I think sometimes perception can warp, and it can cause you to think that maybe you haven't achieved as much as actually in reality you have.
I think it's interesting. I mean, I'm turning this over because we're covering everything organically. I love that. It's interesting you say that, because I mean, what do you use as a marker point? Are you using monetary marker points, or are you using customer reach?
You
are
have
using
to define
followers? Define success for you at that point.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. So like I say, for me, just even coming into year 5, that for me is a huge win. And now going from year 5, I'm probably going to put more kind of tangible monetary and markers for scale. Like I say, I already know that I've doubled my sales, but that's still at a relatively low level for me, for me and what I would like to achieve going forward. And that'll be different for everybody. So I think if one thing that comes out of this is just somebody who's maybe having a tough time, because I've been there and I've cried at my desk, just look at why you're feeling like that, and is it actually you that feels that you're not achieving, or is it that you're measuring yourself against unrealistic benchmarks that you're seeing on social, or from people around you that perhaps are thinking you should be doing or have achieved things that actually aren't important to you. So, because I certainly could have done with that when I've been in my dark times. I think someone just given me a little bit of perspective, and thankfully it came from my past experience of just committing to myself that I'd never give up again. So that's what's driven me on. But even if there's just one person that listens to this and thinks that they're thinking of stopping, like, don't, you could be in a very different place in a year's time.
I did. What's the saying? It's we overestimate what we can achieve. Something like this. We overestimate what we can achieve in a day and underestimate what we can achieve in a year.
100%. With just a bit of focus, dedication, and ask your customer. That is the one thing. Just ask them, is this right? And if it's not, change it.
Knowledge bombs. That's it. Our third main sponsor is Skyline Loft Conversion. Skyline is a high-end loft conversion company who have over 30 years experience in this industry, with over 900 jobs completed as far, all to the most exclusive and highest possible standards. The company is a family-run business located in the northeast of England. From simple loft conversions to custom-built fitted wardrobes, they always serve the customer to their specific needs. No need to look elsewhere, the sky truly is the limit. You can contact them on Facebook at Skyline Loft Conversions, and you can also find them on Instagram at Skyline Loft Conversions. You've been so kind to be with us tonight. I don't want to let you go just yet. We are coming towards the end, because I know your time's very valuable. And as I say, it's been fantastic having you here. But so now, just to tell the listeners, I would say viewers, listeners, you're based now at Studio 54 in Jesmond. You've got a lovely kind of, I'm going to say facility, if that's the right word, which you have in-house designing going on and in-house kind of hands-on work that's happening. We've got a studio next door, a lovely studio for exercise and training, which Team Alpha has a presence in. So you've got this incredible solid oak desk that we're sitting at, which is wonderful. So you're based here now. So from where you are now in year 5, what's your vision now for the future?
Yeah, it's changed. So I started out trading. Selling, buying and selling, and then I went into a brand to create a brand, and I've created that brand, and coming through that experience, I've actually realised that direct to the consumer isn't something I enjoy, and that's just being really truthful with myself. So I'm super proud of the brand, but actually what I enjoy more is providing the service to others to do the same thing. So I'm really passionate about helping other people bring their brands to life, and I'm really enjoying that. So my goals over the years have changed incredibly, and now Studio 54, I'm really comfortable here. I love the activities that we have going on, so the boxing classes. I love having our sample room where we are creating new products every day. I love that there is the salon here for the wonderful wig company who do amazing work helping people experiencing hair loss issues. I'm really proud of what we all do here in this space because it's all about helping others.
Yes.
Every one of us here, that's what our primary focus is, helping others to feel better, do better, create their dreams. So I just want to get this business to a comfortable 6-figure turnover where I've got an amazing team of the six of us that work on our development projects. And I just want to keep this as it is. It's good and I like what we're doing. And I'm actually just in the process right now of licensing AIM, along with 2 other brands that we've created here for clients. Norks, which is sports bras, again supporting women through breastfeeding and times when they're most vulnerable, getting into exercise, and Sporty Mommy, which is maternity activewear and postpartum activewear, so for ladies who've had babies, expecting babies. So those 3 brands, we're actually licensing the assets into an operating company, which will be run by Claire, who is the driving force behind Norks, and Helen, who created Sporty Mommy. And they're going to scale those 3 brands, AIM, Norks and Sporty Mommy, together. So they will do all of the social media, website, influencers, missed a vital part. But behind that business is me from a production point of view, and my really close friend Katie, who is an influencer herself, but she runs a business that helps influencers to monetize their followings. So Katie and I are kind of coming together. She's got the marketing and the access to the people to get the clothing out there, and me, who's got the ability to produce it. And we're coming together to, basically give Helen and Claire a leg up into this business that they will run together, and they will operate those 3 brands and scale those 3 brands. So that'll be a separate business, and then I can stay here in Studio 54, which is where I want to be, just behind the scenes, because I prefer to be behind the scenes, and let Helen and Claire go forward and kind of shine with the brands.
Fantastic. So I'll have to get some more tips on you then from that Instagram. I didn't realize you had such knowledge about it.
I have to say, it isn't my normal area of expertise, but I have picked up a lot from Katie and
right. Maybe you could give me my number or something like that. Maybe give me a bit of an assistance. That's brilliant. So, I mean, Studio 54, it's a lovely facility that you have here, and obviously you're one of our sponsors for the podcast as well, which is fantastic. So, I mean, we've covered so much, we've talked about so much. Is there anything specifically that you would like to lay out for the listeners? Tonight's podcast is centered around entrepreneurs and those, as I say, who are either starting off. So perhaps what we could do is finish with a question. So what advice would you give it to a young entrepreneur, either a boy or girl who's maybe in high school perhaps, or in college, or perhaps even younger, that are looking to start some kind of business, whether it be online, whether it be social media based? What advice would you give to them specifically?
Start it as a side hustle, so never just go into it with both feet. So when I started my entrepreneurial career, I always worked part-time, so keep some money coming in, start it as a side hustle, build it up until it's able to sustain you, and because that's probably the biggest killer of dreams, that in the early days it's not making enough to support you and to grow. So point 1, start it as a side hustle. Point 2, don't give up. So even when you feel like you've hit a wall, find a way to pivot. And that leads into point 3, just ask the question. So I did 1.5 years of market research to know that there was a demand for what I wanted to create before I went and created it. So don't just get an idea on a whim and started up without knowing that there is an audience there to buy it, because at the end of the day, cash is king. If you're not making any sales, there's no point.
Yeah, unless it's back in the .com era, right?
Well, even then, you still had to, you were measured on something. So, website was all on visitors. There had to be something to monetize, didn't there? So,
100%.
if there wasn't an audience there, same with social media. Now, the modern equivalent of the .com boom is micro, macro, influencers, isn't it? But if they don't have the following, there isn't anything to monetize.
Yeah. But you're saying, well, that's it. You need some not structure, but some kind of content there. You need something there that's
something
tangible,
to
something tangible.
Yeah.
But back in the day, the companies would run on losses with the idea that in the future that they would.
Absolutely.
Yeah, but that's not applicable if you're trying to start something
even if
from
they're
scratch.
making losses, there's still something.
There has to be something coming in
there has to be demand
that.
there. And the company might be spending more than it's making, but it's still got to be making something, hasn't it? A lot of the tech companies are loss making in the early years. Well, for a lot of years, but they still have to demonstrate that there's demand there, and the ones that aren't successful are the ones that don't have enough demand. Ultimately.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I mean, a lot that was the issue in the .com, that they were being bought up, but they were found to have no content. They were worthless, really. And you could put .com on the end of anything, like I don't know, dogbed.com, and somebody would.
Well, it was a boom, wasn't it? And then there was the
it was
property
found out.
boom.
It was exposed as being very fragile. So we're going to put links in the description, obviously, for the website and for Studio 54. But could you just to finish, just to tell the listeners social media handles, etc., and where they could find you?
Yeah. So the clothing website is aimathleisure.com. AIMATHLEISURE. So clothing's there. My social handles is just my name, Amy Fettis, AMYFETTIS. And we're just in the process of building a website for Studio 54, so planning to get that launched this side of Christmas, because I think it's time to tell a bit more of a story about the service that we've got here.
Yeah, fantastic. Amy, thank you so much. I know you've been working hard since early this morning, so thank you for staying in with us for the podcast. You've been a fantastic guest, some incredible knowledge there as well. So I do recommend that the listeners rewind to 14 and a half minutes now and replay that one back, but listen to the whole thing. So it's going to be available on the Team Alpha Facebook page, Team Alpha 77. It will also be available on the Team Alpha YouTube channel, which is just under Team Alpha, but you will need to type in my name, James Watling, to find it, because Team Alpha Male comes up on your first search. So thank you very much to Amy for being our first guest on episode 3. Thank you to Callum for running the decks and doing such a professional job. And I will see you guys, or rather, you guys will hear me on episode 4. Take care. Thank you very much.
Thank you.